The Me&Him podcast. Well, hello again from the Me&Him podcast. You've got me, Jason, and him, Matt, here with you again. And today, Dad, we are playing the second part of the interview with my good mate Kim, and this is where he gets pretty deep, right? Like he had a lot to offer.
It does, yeah. And there's so much information, and with some really simple, handy techniques as to how you can overcome some of the issues that you're faced with in life.
What I'm interested in, obviously we've had the benefit of doing the interview already, but what I found interesting was I was trying to point him towards a particular area around a kind of a surface level area of relationships and how they turn up in men's life and how they kind of shape a man's life ultimately, as they do a woman. And he just took it right down to its most foundational level, and it ends up being about love and communication, which I couldn't deny, because I'm looking at the surface level going, relationships are really important and they have impact. But when it comes down to it, underneath all of that is this foundation of love and communication, so.
And what was really interesting was that the first dimension of it is to communicate with yourself inside yourself and learn to love yourself as a quality human being who's got things to share of great worth with family and friends before you start sharing.
I think I have made ground in that area over the last decade, particularly because we often are running from the escaping from our past and potentially playing out old models and roles and then they're causing effects in our lives as we go, and we're constantly getting these feedback loops going, that's not working, and we're looking around trying to blame other people, but ultimately it's coming from us.
And he showed very, very simply where the need for addictions comes from.
Oh yeah. Well, his specialty is addiction, right? So, and it's funny because the conversation I wanted to have with him, which was leading from relationships to how relationships can be affected by addiction to porn, and he had some really interesting thoughts on that. But in this interview, we only actually touched on it at the very end. So I think we're going to have to get him back for another one as well.
Oh yes, we've got to do the Stormy Daniels bit.
Okay, you're trying to keep it topical. I appreciate that. All right, without further ado, part 2 of our interview with Kim Kilgariff. And sorry if I murdered your name, Kim. The Me&Him podcast. So Kim, we've kind of touched on self-care. Mm-hmm. We've touched on connection.
Yep.
And I just want to circle it back now to some degree to get a little bit more specific about relationships, right? Because they are a tricky area. And I know I've screwed it up, more ways than can be counted generally. I've been defensive. I've been insecure. I have I've also kind of been on this riff that I have to be working 24 hours a day to provide, and I'm being a good husband, father, which didn't work either. And I also didn't have enough boundaries, I should say, where I wasn't being respected. I didn't speak for myself. I didn't have the courage in some situations to stand on my own 2 feet as a man and say, hey, no, that I don't appreciate that. So I've made all of the mistakes, right? And I'm pleased to say that I'm a better person now because of the mistakes I've made and what I've learned from those mistakes. You have to kind of obviously learn, not repeat them all the time. So I've got to a place where I'm looking at relationships and I turn up to relationships as a different person, as someone who's quite happy in my own company, but also happy to sort of provide and take care of others. From your perspective, how does a man who's maybe had some relationship issues over time, how does, outside of what you've just explained about self-care and the best principle, how does a man best prepare himself for, having that kind of relationship which will help him to elevate who he is, his state of consciousness, his well-being? Are there some basic ground rules to that?
Well, there's a huge amount of content in what you've asked, but I'll simplify it just to basically keep it digestible, so the audience can kind of go, well, like that's something I can use there. And I think just a quick segue into where it became super important for me. When I was about 15, I nearly died. I had a snake venom poisoning and was reflecting on my death and going, yeah, what's happened here? You know, I'm not sure if I'm going to stay alive. And I really thought about, well, how well did I love in my life so far? That became like a really important question. I mean, I hadn't had the life experience of an adult, but that tenet of holding that at the forefront of your mind is like, how's love going to unfold itself here? Whether it's a relationship between a son and a father, or son and a grandparent, or husband and wife, or friends, there's a love and it's a different quality, but what's it going to do to basically bring the situation into a more harmonious scenario? And that really comes down to communication, you know. And if you start with, and I've developed a kind of method to help clients so that they can kind of remember how to communicate better, because it's at the core of it. And we'll go through that in a sec, because it's pretty easy to remember. The other aspect that is really beginning with the end in mind, going, okay, so how do I want to live my life? And coming back to when you think of that from the perspective of, well, you puts it into a very much you reflect on the bigger picture, then you come back into dealing with the granular of, okay, what's the nuance of how I'm going to communicate in order to get that end result? So if you have the ultimate idea that you guys want to have a good relationship, which is what you're doing now, you're working on it, you're communicating, you're very much the essence of it is just getting to the truth of stuff, right? Then when the time comes and you're separated in this physical form, you've done the best you can on that front. You've really gone in full heart open and unraveled it all. And that's the connection. That's how love would unravel itself in this scenario, for you to communicate and connect and really unravel the truth and get to the closer we can get to the truth, because once you start talking about it, it's never actually the truth. It's just a version of it. But the closer we can get to that, the less we're going to suffer, because we're not living in a distortion in the mind. We're not imagining how we think things should be. Quite often that's a scenario where we'll go back into the past and go, things could have, should have, would have been like that. That just develops a thought process, which then ends up with a whole lot of emotional energy around it, maybe like resentment or judgment or something that will build. And that can often get repressed, particularly with men, because they don't necessarily have good communication. They don't clear it. They don't find out if that's the truth or not. They just have an idea it should have been different to how it was. When they repress that over time, that can turn into a depression, and that basically disconnects them from feeling the joy of life, right? If they're going into the future and overthinking and worrying about stuff, getting anxious that things aren't going to work out, like beginning of the podcast, this isn't going to work, the connection's not there. However, the theme today is actually,
you're damn right,
it's all going to work out in the end, right? And the connection's not there. I don't trust, because essentially it's still a spiritual issue of not trusting that there's another force working to make it perfect, in a sense. And if we can trust in that, then we don't have any anxiety around it not being going to work in the right way, the perfect way that's actually going to be not just it's like a learning that's going to be very pertinent for all of those involved, because there's not just one person or another. We're a dynamic here. The three of us are learning together and learning from each other. And that, again, comes back to that same idea of, well, how love's going to unfold here. What's it teaching us? Because love, that being the energy of the connection. We can call it all kinds of things, the universe, we can call it God, we can call it another force we want, right? It doesn't matter. And we're all aware of it, and that's the driving force. But so coming back to getting to the truth of the matter is really about communication. And it's a struggle for men. They haven't been taught how to communicate very well. They haven't been taught to communicate with proper intention, with a loving heart. They haven't been taught to be really clear, although they can be clear in let's say, a business sense, where they might be able to articulate a concept, an idea, and a structure. When it comes to a relationship, you've got to nuance the feelings, and the feelings are so important, because the feelings are the language of the soul. If we don't share those, then, what you're delivering is just sort of data to the other person. They don't, especially a woman, they want the subtlety, they want the presence, and they want the feelings. So that's important to be able to communicate, and then that stuff will become authentic. So the method I've developed for that to help men along is I just call it the open palm method. And then, do you want me to share that now, or is that too much data? Do you want to reflect on what I've just said?
No, I'm happy.
Dad's taking notes, right. So go for it.
Yeah, okay, mental notes.
So they just applied it to 5 different points, because then it's easy to remember. So the first is the pinky promise you make to yourself when you want to communicate with someone, that I'm going to set an intention to communicate in the best possible way for the highest good of both of us. Because quite often we want to just offload stuff, and we don't really have an intention for it to be good for the other person. It's just about getting that, getting the release of having to say what you said, but you haven't considered how it will impact the other person, how they might digest it. So if you have a real intention to, and you promise yourself to do it in a harmonious way, without really violating the other person in any way, or putting them down or criticizing them, or really making them feel you really considered how they're feeling, then that's a very good important starting point. It also means when you set the intention and you've promised that to yourself, you're going to create a space where the communication is possible. Like, you don't just yell out the window at someone. If you've got an important thing to say and it's to your partner, or it's to your son or your mother or whoever it is, you go, look, I really want to come and talk with you, and make the space and time for that, where they're not going to be plugged into something else. They're not going to be distracted. They're not going to fob you off. They're not going to be cut off. They're not going to be doing something else. So making the space and time for connection is very important, and men probably need to make a lot of effort to do that as well. Women often come at a man as well and ask them to, let's talk about this, and they're withdrawing from that connection because they know what's coming. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And often when men are in focus mode, they're actually really drilling down into an issue. We're always trying to solve problems, the masculine mind. We're always trying to we're on a mission all the time, right? And if someone's pulling us out of that mission to sort of talk about something, that creates a bit of irritation. So there needs to be a space and time for both parties to go, let's really connect and share something here. So second point, this is the marriage finger. So it's about what brings you together in connecting. What is it that you love about the other person? If you can share something you love about them, or love about their intention, and it might be just as simple as, look, I know you've always got good intentions in mind, but I don't understand what's happened here and why that's set up. It's just focusing on the thing that's bringing together. It's you might give the person something you're grateful for, something you appreciate about them. It just drops the ego, right? It opens up a doorway for them to go, yeah, okay, I'm listening. You got my ear. If you come in with the meat in the sandwich straight away, whatever you're trying to say, and a person will just hear the negative, and the ego is going to defend itself. So we want to get past that. So the next finger is, it's the birdie,
Isn't
right?
That one?
That's the birdie.
That's the bird?
That's the one. That's the point you're trying to make. Oh. But of course, you want to turn it down and not deliver it in a offensive way. So it's clearly that finger for a reason. You want to deliver the truth of what you're trying to say, and basically keep it really simple. And then instead of lingering on that and having a whole diatribe about why you've got a monopoly on the truth and the other person's wrong, you just make it really obvious. This is what the issue is. And you skip to the next finger, which is the trigger finger, right? Owning your triggers, owning what's triggering you, is the key to taking the focus off the birdie, right? Taking the focus off that finger and making it about you. Okay, so look, I realize that, when you're blah, 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 blah. Here's an example. Just say you're on a podcast and the other person has got their mic working, and you might want to say, look, I'd really love it to that we can connect on this.
I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah.
Well, just for the listeners, we had some headphone issues at the start of this one. So yeah, okay, keep it going, Dad. Kim, and I'll try it with Dad later.
Yeah. So the intention would be to really have a harmonious connection. Make sure the dad's feeling not like taken down by the issue. He's already been embarrassed by it and feeling good about it. And then you'd be focusing on the stuff that you appreciate him. I really appreciate that you're doing this podcast, Dad, and you're showing up every time we do it with all your enthusiasm and you're giving it your all. And the best part of you is how you share who you are honestly and stuff. And you're not focused on the tech part, right? That's okay. Then you say it does happen regularly that we've got this tech issue, and that's the finger, right? And you say, well, what triggers me is that I've gone over this a number of times. And then you finish with the thumbs up, which is a positive example of how you could do it better. And then you come up with a strategy. You feed him the strategy. Say, look, I might actually just write down a cheat sheet for you of all the bullet points that you need to go through and check at the beginning of this session, so that you can just
music to my ears.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, you don't know all the shit I have to spell out for this guy every other. But yes, I'll add that to my list to do.
Yeah. This is just a hypothetical, okay? And then you would give him the example of this is how you could do it better that would help me. And then you say, well, would you be willing to do that? And that just cuts through a few connection points and make sure that they're all done in a way that doesn't get the ego up, because all communication, if we don't have an authentic communication, then we have an egoic communication, then we're going to have a clash of personalities. We're going to have my idea, your idea. It's all just going to be a fight then. One person defending themselves, one person attacking.
Well, it becomes parent-child one way or the the right? Which is
parent-child, oppressor, victim. It can be, we want two adults communicating, and that's the way, one way to do it respectfully.
The palm method, huh?
Yeah, it's just my invention, but there's obviously many other things. There's like non-violent communication out there. There's other styles and things.
I always thought it was the shit sandwich, like.
Well, that's the other one we've talked about before, which is the bread, and on either side of the meat, you have to deliver the doughy part. Oh, I think you're really good at this, and by the way, you're shit at this, but I love the way you do that.
Yeah, still love you.
That's a simple version of it, but sometimes that's too obvious for people to, and they react.
Sana, I'm really pleased to see what a fine job you've done of following my bad habits.
Me?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay, that's right. That's your that's the doughy part, is it?
Well, it's a compliment.
Yeah, right. Look, Kim, you've given, it's interesting how you broaden it out. And I kind of probably asked quite a pointed question thinking about men's relationships, whether it be with a woman or a man, it doesn't really matter. But what you've done is you've broadened it right to this idea about how does love show up? How do I create love? And the tactic there is the way I communicate and being aware of how I'm reaching out and how that's being received and how that forms that bond. So it sounds like there's a lot of onus on me being empowering myself to be better, right? Like, I remember another quote, I can't remember who said it, but it was don't ask for things to be easier, ask for yourself to be better. And this is one of those examples. Like, how would I apply this palm method? In fact, I have an opportunity this afternoon to do it. So I'm going to set the intention once I finish this podcast and give that a bit of a run. But I love it. So I was looking quite micro, and you've taken it back to just a very fundamental place again of how are we showing up and how we're communicating with respect in order to create those connections, which will then help us take another step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Look,
help us all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Not just male or female, but up and down the lineage.
Yeah, I mean, men often need a structure in order to look at and work on something so they can feel like they're fixing something. But at the end of the day, when you focus on love, it's shifting where you're coming from. It's shifting thinking about things from a mental point of view, which can just trip you up and thinking you've got to fix something, and shifting it into a heart-centered space where there's nothing to fix there, because you put yourself in a loving state where you care about others, then that reflects back to you as well. It's a two-way street. When you're in that, it's a state of love, then it affects the other person, affects you. And there's not really any need for a technique when you come from that place, because intuitively you'll operate and say the right things in the right way if you put yourself there. But the structure of the method that I gave is to give the mind a focus to relearn how it's doing things wrong in a way that will not say wrong, but in a way that's not effective. So again, effectiveness is the measure of truth, in the sense that if what you're doing and how you're communicating isn't getting you the results you need, then you're going to need to look at it, the structure of that, how that communication is not effective. So try a different way. And the method you're giving you is an effective way that I've tried and tested with a lot of people.
You heard it here first on the Me&Him podcast, right? There's some real gold nuggets coming your way. Try them out tonight and give us some feedback. Just speaking of that, we do have our website where we do welcome emails and correspondence, and that's Me&Him podcast with MEAND him podcast.com, not au, just .com, and shoot us a note. Let us know what your thoughts are. Kim, you've covered some really important ground here in terms of relationship building, self-care. And it's interesting because the conversation around men's issues and mental health can get very narrow very quickly around these are the problems, and we're portrayed badly on the media, and we're not all violent, and there's domestic violence and there's suicide, and there's it's a minefield out there in terms of issues discussed, but you've really just gone underneath it all. If we had to go down to real basics here, we're human, as you said at the very start, we're a spiritual being having a human experience, and part of that is to express love. And part of ways to express love is maybe to relearn some of the things that used to come far more naturally when we were in communities. And so here's a tactic to help just step by step build those connections out, which maybe puts a ladder out of that sort of that pit that we sometimes find ourselves in. Oh, really useful stuff, Dad. What have you thought about? What you meant to share?
I've loved every minute of it. It's been music to my ears.
Refreshingly simple, but undeniably true as well.
Well, as I've mentioned, and you have done so too, I've had patches where I've lived a clean life. And in retrospect, they were some of the most beautiful periods of my life. And I know I shouldn't say this, Kim, but I've been castigating myself ever since for not continuing to do it. Because when you know where the right path is, and you choose to walk on a different side, you're deliberately denigrating yourself.
Kim, just on that, that's quite a brave admission, to be honest, Dad. And I know we've spoken separately about this sort of topic, but Kim, just addressing that, is it ever too late to make some change, even after years of sort of giving up on on maybe some of these practices or whatever it might have been, saying, hey, I don't have the self-discipline, I tried it, didn't work. What would you advise, not necessarily Dad, but anyone who has gone, I know what's right, but I just haven't been strong enough or able enough, or life circumstance hasn't allowed me to, whatever it might be. What do you say to those people?
Well, look, it's what I've really noticed is that most people will go through a period of time realizing there's things in their life that they don't want to have in there. There's behaviors and choices and ways of being that aren't conducive to the life they want to live. And then they go about the process of trying to fix those things. And unfortunately, when you focus on them, then they become bigger. They become a problem, and you can't get out of the gooey mess of those things. Instead of trying to fix it, I think the key as a starting point is to go, what do I want to create? And when you put your focus onto that and you use the power of your body-mind system and get it healthy so that you can use it properly, because if you're out of it, then you're not going to be able to create anything. You create what you want. You really decide what you want. You make the choices each day. This is what I'm going to do towards creating that lifestyle and that life that I'd love to live. And then when you do that, you put your energy into, because the man's always creating energy, he's always focusing on something, and if he puts it on the thing that he loves, then that aspect of getting the wind in your sails from the universe that you're kind of implying about before, Matt, it comes in because you've already decided you're co-creating this reality with another divine force, and that will back you up. Of course, it'll work in the reverse, not quite with the same gusto, but when you focus on the good, you're backed up. And so it doesn't take much to then build off that kind of energy. No matter what stage you are in life, when you turn towards the things that are serving you at a higher level, like that bring you love, and the connections say, you guys are just doing this now, things will follow from that. They will amplify, it will snowball. So what I say, focus on what you love and less about trying to fix things, because that is an arduous task that will just go on and on and on and on. And we're all faulty. We're all broken in one sense. but we don't need to be unbroken. We actually just need to create what we want. So that's one principle I think that's super important to keep in mind wherever you are in your life, if you have been caught up in stuff that's kind of dragging you down. And the other aspect is to really recognize, I guess, and decode. Well, I have a whole sort of program around this, which is, I'll just give it simply. It's about creating the dream that you've always wanted to live in your life. And the dream in itself stands for DREAM, like the first part of that.
Here we go.
Here we go again. What's coming. See how my mind works. So D stands for decoding what's holding you back. It's essentially understanding your shadow side. You decode where, if you don't know yourself, you really don't know where you're going to trip yourself up. So you really need to understand the character, who you are, and what things you've brought in. That's also from family structures, from trauma, from personality types, from genetics, ethnicity, whatever it is. But you just have to lay it all out, and you have to understand it. That doesn't mean you're going to spend your life fixing it. It means that you understand it and you're aware of it, so you don't let those things drag you into a slippery slope down into a hole. So if you've come from a family of alcohol, and I did, my father was alcoholic, well, okay, I choose not to go down that path with a greater intention than someone who wouldn't have had that awareness, right? I choose to I'll really be careful about how I manage my relationship with alcohol, because I have an alcoholic father. He's a functional alcoholic, he's a barrister through his life, but he drank all the time. He's still to this day, and I choose not to go that path. So I'm just dropping that example in, not with any intention, but just to highlight, like, where are your shadows, right? You have to understand them. And then that's the decoding. The second part of that is R, which stands for recoding. Recoding means, okay, what are the obstacles that are in the way that I need to clear out of the way in order to have what I'm focusing on, the dream that you're wanting to create. So you have to recode those. You have to move those obstacles out of the way without thinking that you have to fix all of yourself. You only have to move the obstacle out of the way that is causing problems. And once you address that, then energy will flow, and you'll be getting like a whole wind of support for wind in the sails, let's put it that way. The next category is like encoding the mind. You do have to change your mind, literally. You have to change your identity. And it doesn't just mean moving the obstacles out of the way. You have to encode the new identity into your brain, basically, and into your subconscious. And the brain can change at any point. It's completely, as you heard the term before, neuroplastic, which means it doesn't matter how hardwired it is for a certain structure or a certain addiction or a certain pattern. It can rewire it with enough impetus and enough encoding of new information. So that has to be proportional to the imbalance that's going on there. So if someone has a bipolar disorder, then they're going to have to encode a whole new structure into their brain in order to heal that, rather than just taking a pill that sort of band-aids the effect. So the encoding is very important. I do that with a lot of hypnotic stuff and a lot of work with meditative processes and so on. And these things take a little bit of work, but if it's not done in the right order, it doesn't really work. If you try and encode before you've decoded all the patterns that are going to throw you out of balance, those patterns of shadow side part, they're the saboteurs, are going to take you down again, and if you don't understand certain patterns of the characters that are sabotaging you, whether you're a controlling person, or you've got perfectionistic tendencies, or you have avoidance patterns, or you have whatever those things, there's a whole stack of different specific sabotage patterns that we have to understand, and we all have them in different proportions. So once you know them, then you can develop a higher intelligence around how to overcome them. So, for example, I'm getting pretty long in the answer here, but Jace, if your tendency might be to need control over a certain situation in order to feel relaxed, then and that can actually, your mind will tell you that that's a good quality and that's great, but actually that sabotage pattern's stressing you out and causing dysfunction in your life. It's causing you to it's messing up your life, basically, right? So then the higher perspective of someone who's got that pattern, not suggesting you to, I'm just giving you as an example, right?
Oh, you nailed it.
Yeah, would be to connect to a higher level of control, which would be to connect to a spiritual understanding that things are happening in a certain way for a certain reason. I might not understand them right now, but that will, if I can surrender to that, then I can surrender my need to have control in the situation. Then I can relax. If I can relax, things are going to move a lot easier, and I'll stop actually interfering with the energetics here. I'll just sit back and see how it unfolds. And there may be some gold on the other side of this opportunity. So that's like an antidote to the sabotaging pattern of a controller. But every one of these aspects of our character all have antidotes, and they'll have a higher perspective. I mean, as a very foundation for every single human being, we've got a critical mind, an analytical mind that turns into a judge, basically. And, originally in our native sense, when we were out living in the prairies and hunter-gatherers or whatever we were doing, we would have to have that highly aware judge to analyze and scan the horizon, especially as a man, because we've got this protective instinct. We want to be able to look at a glance and see where's the danger, where's the problems, where are the holes, what can we punch holes in this situation. That's a very kind of important part of survival, but we don't live in survival anymore. So now we have this overactive part of our brain in the brain stem, which now just takes over and criticizes, analyzes, judges everything around us all the time and other people constantly. And that keeps us out of a state of connection. It keeps us out of authenticity. It keeps us out of proper communication because we're already judging the person.
Well, it creates separateness, doesn't it? As soon as I judge,
yeah,
I'm different from you, and if I'm insecure, I'm going to try and make sure that there's something I can find wrong with you, so I feel good about myself. So
exactly,
yes,
and we justify it in lots of ways, and we're tricked by that part of our judging mind, thinking, because now it's hijacked by a cerebral cortex, which is an intelligent intellect that says, well, it's justified to judge people because I've got this intelligent way of looking at it and turning it into something we think is important, but in the end it's just your perspective on stuff and it's not actually important. So there's a higher perspective on the judge. Again, it's like developing a sage-like quality of seeing things in a process way, in a pattern way that doesn't actually send an energy of judgment to the other person. You have a discernment. You have a very a way of discerning a scenario so that you still get the best out of it without having to make another person feel different to how they should, and they're judging them in any way.
So I'd hate to interject, but you said dream. I've written it down.
I haven't finished. Yeah,
I'm going to get back to that. Decoding, recoding, and then encoding.
Encoding. Yeah. So A is action and activating taking action on those things that you can't. Action supersedes everything. If you can just encode your brain all day long with exercises and you don't take action on the things that are going to come to you in that's going to be delivered to you. So through the circumstances that the universe is going to create, the circumstances are super important because they essentially are the feedback loop where the universe has created a structure for your individual soul or spiritual being in order for it to understand itself. Maybe it's to heal itself. Maybe it's to move on from something. But those circumstances are the opportunity for the soul to reveal itself. So taking those opportunities very seriously will then allow you to take action in those moments. And then you can materialize, manifest, or create the magic that you want. That's what M stands for. So that's the end result. You have to receive that the product of that which you've created as well. You're working a lot towards it. Decoding, recoding, encoding the mind. Most of that's done as inner work. That is all sort of predominantly inner work. Taking actions that step into the bridge between the inner and the outer world, and then living in it is the moment where your inner world completely absorbs the outer world and you've manifested as you want. So that's the dream method in an explanation anyway.
Wow. Man, that's very useful, and I imagine also quite complex in terms of every individual is going to have a whole different series and sets of stuff to decode and recode, and everyone's dream's different, right?
Everyone's dreams are different, yeah. But like I said before that, if we're to simplify it without looking through that whole process, because that structure is a system and a method that takes people through the process that I've described without them being able to stuff it up, because mainly we're left to our own devices. We don't understand that there's all these work forces inside ourselves that are working against us, and there are aspects of us. So sometimes you need support to get past those. A lot of people do. So that method, which we do in retreat, is to take people past and through all those stages so that they actually get the result that they're wanting. But if I was to just shed some light on it, I mean, as a general idea for anyone work on themselves at home, as a starting point, you really need to begin with issues around, if you're decoding your past and your shadow side, you really need to begin with issues around fear, attachment, egoic desires. You need to work on those things. And the family of origin stuff, where it all began. It all began in those traumatic places where you develop core beliefs, where you developed situations. And then that can be, family of origin can be the birth family, but if you're obviously adopted, it's the other family that you've grown up with. It can also be a tribe if you've grown up in a spiritual community, or if you've grown up in some kind of identity or a particular race or country. There's patterns that go with all of that identity. If we don't see that and don't understand it, then we're really programmed in a way where we're unconscious about the influence it has on us. So you start with that, and when you've got that in perspective, and that's really important. Just say we're looking at a family situation, we're looking at where is the blockage in that family structure, where is it not flowing? How did that divorce with my parents traumatize me, or what happened to that relationship 2 generations back where my dad died and my grandma grew up with 14 kids all on her own, and how did that affect the kids not growing up with the masculine role model? All those things can have deep psychological impact on the following generations. And people can work on themselves individually for years and not realize that the problem wasn't even theirs. They're just carrying something from their grandfather or their father or their mother or whatever. So that's a real starting point. And once you've got it, you don't have to work on that forever. You just get it into perspective. Secondly, then you have to work on issues of power and control, and that go in relationship with the feminine. If you're a man, it's going to be the dynamic with the other, the partner, and that's around power dynamics. Usually we have to understand money in that as well, and we have to understand our power in relation to that sexuality, what we do with the sexuality, and how we need to keep respect for that energy if that's frittered off in the wrong direction, if it's damaged in any way, or if it's utilized for some kind of addictive behavior like porn or whatever. That affects the psyche of the feminine. They are tuned in with subtle energy, and a woman will know. They won't know necessarily intellectually. They'll feel if a man's just engaging his sexual energy with someone else, like if it's another person he's connected to, or if it's with porn and he's just doing it through an imaginary thing. That'll impact negatively the emotional relationship you have with the woman, because they feel these subtle things. Not every woman's aware of that, but women who are will really express it clearly. But so managing the sexual energy and realizing it's one of the most powerful forces we have to really look at, and men need to get that in the right space. And then third is dealing with your personal power and your issues of your own self-esteem issues, basically. Those 3 areas are the first starting point. And they're all kind of like below the belt stuff. If you haven't got those in check, there's no real point working with higher sort of spiritual faculties and working with other areas of activating your third eye or anything that's going to be of a massive surge, or there's no way to get past dealing with the stuff that's under the carpet. You have to deal with that first. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. I mean, there's a lot of info there. Yeah. Which, I mean, this is the reason why I like spending time with Kim, right? Because he will just download a process and then we'll open it up, and I'll have to start to reframe the way I kind of have been looking at things. You've given us a couple of really lovely acronyms there, not just that palm method and the dream, and then just a bunch of considerations. Dad, I think we're going to have to get Kim back to, because one thing I'd really want to explore with you, what you just finished with actually, which was that whole idea of porn and how it affects that male-female relationship. And last time I remember walking with you down the beach one time, we're talking about how the chemical sort of read and the estrogen and everything shifts because men might be releasing their tensions via sort of imaginary sort of images. But that's a whole nother podcast. I think we may just start to bring this down around to a close. Dad, there's been a lot we've covered and some absolute gold here from a man I have a lot of respect for and has helped a lot of people. How did you feel, how did that resonate with you, I guess? And also anything you want to build or add before we bring this to a close?
Most of it we're familiar. I've experienced those sorts of things and teachings at different points in my life. But I like the way you present everything, Kim. And there's a spirituality and a passion which comes across, and it's very infectious. So thank you.
Absolutely. Pleasure. There's so much more we can open up here. But look, Kim, if people wanted to find you, where would they? What's the easiest way to sort of track you down online?
Interesting. Okay, well, my business is called Clear Health, and so it's one way to they reach me through social media channels there.
So that's clearhealth.com.au?
Yep, yeah, that's right. However, I've taken that website down potentially at the moment while we're making some
well, don't
changes.
Go there, then.
Don't go there just yet, yeah. They can also probably direct message me. My name is spelt there is a possibility to find me on Messenger, Facebook. They can friend me that way.
Contact us at Me&Him podcast, I guess, and we can
contact you there, and then
referrals.
You can. Yeah, that's right. You can send me a DM through those channels. Yeah, I've got a whole other avenue of different stuff open, but I won't give all that out right now. Just there.
I bet you do. You're always working on something. He's got many different plates spinning, always something interesting going on. Hey, look, mate, it's been great to chat to you. I'm so glad you could actually meet Dad, Matt, and
great. Eventually.
It's taken 15 years or so. I know that, I've spoken a lot about you over the years. And look, I'm looking forward to seeing you again shortly. And look, if you're open to it, I'd love to have you come back around and explore that other topic about how men can manage their own energies and what have you. There's so much more we can talk about. The Me&Him podcast. Dad, been an absolute pleasure. Kim, thank you so much indeed. We've got quite a chunky episode here. I'm actually going to re-listen to it, not just for the editing purposes, but just for the gold that was being bestowed upon us. Because, I really want to make sure I take that value, because I know you're not someone who just presents this off the cuff. You've thought about this for years and years and years. And Dad, maybe something you didn't know is that Kim used to work in the area of helping people quit smoking. And I imagine a lot of those techniques and a lot of the reason people had those addictions, probably provided some sort of genesis for this wider work you do now. Kim, is that fair to say?
Yeah, I've been working with addiction in general. Smoking obviously is a more simple version of it, but alcohol and drugs and various things through different retreat structures that, have required me to look at a deeper pattern for the whole reason for why people haven't been able to resolve those issues and how they can. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks, Kim, again for joining us on this. This up here is certainly in Port Macquarie. It's a sunny Saturday afternoon. Dad, what do you got on for the rest of the day?
Work and more work.
Oh yeah. Well, I thought you retired. What's happening?
Don't be silly. Retirement's just a name for another phase.
Yeah, different type of work, I guess, right? I know you're packing your house and everything. We'll no doubt get an update on that very shortly. But for now, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you, sir. Nice to see you, Kim. Thanks, Dad.
Thank you, guys. Really nice to talk with you. All the best, Matt, and hope the move goes smoothly. Looks like you're partway through that.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye for now.
The Me&Him podcast.